Good evening, everyone. I'm Gary Christenson, Mayor of the City of Malden, and we're gathered here in Studio A of Malden Access Television to give you the latest information that we have regarding COVID-19. As I was mentioning, we are here at Malden Access Television, so I do want to thank the staff who continue to work with us to be able to bring you this show. And I also want to thank our guests who are here while they're remotely participating tonight, and that is Alex Pratt, our Community Development Director for the Malden Redevelopment Authority. We also have Glenn Cronin, Police Captain and the Director of the Emergency Management Department, along with Chris Webb, our Health Director. They will be tonight's panelists, and next week at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, we are going to look to what's happening in the business community as it relates to this pandemic. So we'll be joined by Joan Ford Mongeau, the Executive Director of the Malden Chamber of Commerce, along with the Chamber Board President, Donna Denoncourt. And we will also have Chamber Showcase producer and host, Lisa O'Loughlin. And we will have finally our Business Development Director for the city, Kevin Duffy, in studio next Wednesday night at 7 p.m. As always, we want to provide you with a couple of updates since we last met last week. When it comes to the cases themselves, we're going to have our health director report on the number of cases as of today and sadly the number of deaths that we have experienced here in Malden. The one message that I wanted to relay to you under our caseload is the importance of testing. So I've mentioned this before, Cambridge Health Alliance, a great community partner, has set up a testing site at their location at 195 Canal Street. And so they're testing all of our residents. It's very important that you get tested, and it's free, but it's only by scheduled appointment. It's available Monday through Friday. So again, we urge you to get tested by calling 617-665-2928. Regarding the latest with respect to state updates, I think many of you know Governor Baker announced on Monday that the economy will start to be reopened using a phased approach, and it's going to be based obviously on public health guidance. The essential service businesses that are currently operating will not be changed. They will continue as is. However, there will be now new mandatory workplace safety requirements as part of this phased approach. The three areas that were announced on Monday to be open is construction, manufacturing, and the houses of worship. There are detailed guidelines and protocols for all of these sectors, and they can be found on our website at www.cityofmalden.org. In the area of manufacturing, one of the three sectors that were reopened this week, most were already opened because they have been deemed an essential service here in our city. Business Development Director Kevin Duffy has been in touch with all these establishments and will be working with them moving forward to offer any support they may need. Nelson Miller, our building commissioner, will be the liaison when it comes to the second prong of the reopening of construction. So he is going to be doing spot checks and talking with the liaisons to each of the projects that are occurring in Malden, such as at 200 Exchange Street or at 11 Charles Street. We'll be working with the interfaith community as well as our health director. I believe we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow to talk about how we move forward with the reopening of the houses of worship. And I think our director will be able to outline some of the protocols that we expect in addition with the state to make sure that all of our houses of worship reopen safely. As for parks, we've had many questions about when we will be starting to relax some of the protocols that have been in place around parks, and we will be making an announcement as we head into this weekend. It will not include the utilization of equipment or playgrounds, but we do want to start moving toward allowing some passive recreation. We just feel, I think along with a lot of other people, that we need to be slow and cautious. We've come this far. We don't have to go back to where we were. So we also must see and I think you know this, a significant and consistent decrease in our numbers, not just in the confirmed cases, but also in the percentage of those tested before we start up with any large-scale events. So that's why in our conversations with our health director, we will be issuing orders on the cancellation of this year's July 4th festivities, our summer concerts, and the senior cookout. More information to follow, but this will be coming really soon. The other thing that does remain in effect, because I know some people are wondering, based on what was announced Monday, have some of the other state orders changed? They have not. The state order remains in effect, which requires face masks or the covering of your face in public spaces when you are not able to socially distance. The Board of Health order also remains in effect when you're going into Super Stop and Shop, Super 88, and some of the other places in Malden that you must have a face mask. City services, all city buildings still remain closed to the public, but are open during normal business hours. If you have any questions, please call 781-397-7000. Under resources, that's one of the really strong attributes that our community offers while we fight back against this pandemic. And so, you know, Bread of Life, the Chinese Culture Connection, there's been so many organizations, Elliott, Family Resource Center. So we want to make sure if you have any needs, the liaison to us has been Malden Neighbors Helping Neighbors. So they really have served as a clearinghouse for us on a wide array of issues. So if you have any questions, please call them at 339-224-4842. And then, again, I mentioned that we have Alex Pratt here tonight. He's going to be talking about the Malden Rental Assistance Program, which was done in conjunction with the Malden Redevelopment Authority and the City Council. We are up and running on that. And we also want to make sure that we remind everyone, as difficult as it is with everything going on, please don't forget to participate in this year's census. This will affect us for the next 10 years, so when we're out of this pandemic, the information that we're providing now will have an impact on us for a long time to come. It only takes minutes, I think maybe 10 minutes tops, to complete your 2020 census. But again, it will impact schools, roads, transportation, etc. Alex Pratt, once again, can be able to speak to that as well. So, as always, we want to afford our panelists to say a few words, and then we will do the most important thing, which is to get to your questions and hear from you as to what's happening out there in Malden. So I will go to our Communications Director, Ron Cochran, to introduce each of the panelists to make brief introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And once again, we just want to remind everyone that we are taking questions. We're queuing those up on our Facebook page at facebook.com/City of Malden. We'll also look for questions on the YouTube feed for this particular airing on MATV's YouTube channel. And then, of course, if you wanted to, you could also email info@cityofmalden.org. And then lastly, the call-in number, which is up on your screen. You can also call in on the line there. First, we'd like to introduce our Emergency Management Director, Captain Glenn Cronin, for an update. Go ahead, Glenn.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Mayor, for inviting me here to speak tonight. And also I want to thank MATV as well. My name is Glenn Cronin. I am the Patrol Commander for your Police Department. I'm also the city's Emergency Management Director. From an emergency management perspective, my job is to do just that, manage emergencies. However, the coronavirus crisis is not your typical emergency in the traditional sense. It's entirely new territory for all of us. We've managed our resources and our assets to the best of our ability. Every day, every week has been a new learning curve, a new challenge, and a new development, not just for us as a municipality, but more importantly for you, our community, our residents. And right now we're facing a new challenge, and that is the reopening of our community. So Governor Baker's 4-phase plan has been outlined. And together, we will be able to navigate all the new rules and regulations that accompany each phase. I also just want to mention that it's important to remember that Massachusetts was and is the third highest state in the country as far as positive rates, hospitalization, and deaths. The good news is that we've been in a downward trend in those three categories for at least the past 2 weeks. So now is not the time for us to let up on that. We're trying to balance public health with the economy, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. But I do think that our approach has been careful and cautious, which I do think is reasonable, necessary, and proportional.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Cronin. Next, we're going to go to our Public Health Director, Chris Webb. Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you having these shows weekly. I think it has a huge impact on people's understanding of what we're working with there. And thank you, Glenn. That was a great introduction. I have the horrible task of letting everybody know what the numbers are today. And the number right now is 1,053 positive cases with 71 deaths. This is lower than we had anticipated at this point, which is a very welcome surprise. It is essential that people keep going the way they've been going and maybe tighten up a little bit, if I could be so brash. I know it's a lot to ask, but I think right now we've been at it for a long time and people kind of get into bad habits. And it's time to reassess what we're doing with our masks, how often we're changing them, how often we're washing our hands, and how often we're cleaning our surfaces. I know a lot of people are saying, Mr. Webb, you're out of your mind. I'm doing it all the time. That's great. But for those of us, and we know who we are, that aren't doing it, refocus, stay the course, and get as much of this summer back as possible. We are in a great position right now. We have enough masks to help with, but not enough to give to everybody. This new phase is going to be a very interesting period of time where we learn how to manage people's expectations and provide customer service and essential needs that people have. So we're really looking forward to this next phase. We do have a board meeting tomorrow night, and to echo the mayor, I will be recommending that we cancel all of the large gatherings, meaning parades, 4th of July celebrations, the concerts, and road races and things like that.
Okay.
It's just probably not in our best interest unless we can get below 5% infection rate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. And next, we are going to go to Alex Pratt. Alex Pratt is the Community Development Director for the Malden Redevelopment Authority. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Ron. So I want to talk about two things tonight. The first is our rental assistance program that we launched Monday evening. This is a program for low-income Malden renters who are struggling to pay their rent. And what they can do is they can go to cityofmalden.org/rent and learn more about the program and see if they are eligible. If you are eligible and you are selected in a lottery process, you can receive 1 month's rent. That'll be paid directly to your landlord. And the idea is we're going to be helping these households stay stabilized, because we know that as soon as the courts open back up, as soon as this eviction moratorium that is currently in effect is lifted, we're going to see a really high number of eviction cases moving forward. So this is our effort to keep as many people home, to keep as many people stabilized. We know a lot of folks in Malden are hurting right now. And so this rental assistance program, again, cityofmalden.org/rent. This rental assistance program, we're really trying to get out to everybody in the community, so everyone who needs it has a chance at getting some assistance. And the mayor also mentioned the U.S. Census for folks who have been staying at home. Firstly, thank you. It's important. And while you are home, there is still more you can do to help, in addition to washing your hands and wearing your mask and everything that Director Webb was just saying. And that's fill out the U.S. Census. The 2020 census will determine our funding as a city for the next 10 years from the federal government for all sorts of programs. Public safety, a lot of the resources that Captain Cronin has available. Public health, a lot of what Director Webb has available. And then our rental assistance program as well is funded mostly with federal dollars. And if we have a higher population count in this year's census, we will get more money for programs like that. And we don't know what the next emergency will be. We don't know when it will happen. And we don't know how long it's going to take for us to recover as a community, economically, socially, culturally. But one thing we can all do to help our city be more prepared for whatever comes next is to fill out that census. We anticipate that one person filling out the census could equal up to $2,000, maybe $2,500 each person per year for the next 10 years for the city of Malden. So that's obviously a lot of money, and we want to be making sure that we're making sure that everyone's counted.
Great.
So go to my2020census.gov to participate.
Thank you. Okay. So
Thank you, Mr. Pratt.
So at this point, one thing I've learned by hosting this show is to try to borrow from other shows to make this informative and interesting. So it's at this point that I will now put all three of our panelists in the Webb, which is a segment that has been taken from the other hit show here at Malden Access Television called Around the Rim, hosted by Nesta Dudley. And what it is, I get to ask the panelists any question I want, and they have to answer it on the spot. So we will do this now, and then we will get to your questions. So to Mr. Webb, our health director, on last week's show, we had Christian Lanfair from Cambridge Health Alliance, and he stated that in his experience during this pandemic, and I think in his research, he felt that the use of gloves was not an impediment to contracting the disease. And I know you have been a proponent, I believe, early on when this struck. And I wanted to now see if anything's changed on your end, and if so, what might that be?
I have to say that, yes, my opinion has changed. There's enough evidence now that says that gloves are helpful, but they are not a guarantee against transmission, because a lot of people don't know how to properly don and doff gloves.
Right.
There is actually a preferred way to do it so that you're taking the glove off and not recontaminating your hands.
Right, right, okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Webb. Now to Mr. Cronin. There's been a lot of debate about the effectiveness of masks. So let me ask you now, after 2 months or so, do you feel overall that masks do make a difference in stopping to, or helping to stop the spread of COVID-19?
Yes, Mayor. So of course, you know very well that the World Health Organization and the CDC have gone back and forth on the mask issue. Early on, we were told that only individuals that were in fact infected should be wearing masks, and that healthy people did not need to wear them. Then they sort of flip-flopped on that, and they said that everybody should be wearing masks. I myself feel as though all of us wearing masks is helpful. It is a deterrent. It's better than not having any barrier in front of you. So I'm definitely in favor of having masks on everybody.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cronin. And now finally, Mr. Pratt, when it comes to the census, what is your prediction on the percentage of Malden residents responding to it?
100%. But that can only happen if everyone listening to this show takes a census, tells their friends, tells their neighbors from a distance. You can call them, you can post it on Facebook, you can send emails. Just tell everyone to take the census. It takes 10 minutes. It's easy. It's safe. It's really important.
Okay. And then for myself, I'll put myself in the Webb too. Someone recently asked me what's the first thing I'm going to do as we start to work our way out of this. You guessed it. Haircut. Last time I got one was mid-February. So a lot of people have been saying to me, it's good to see what you used to look like in the 80s. So that'll be one of the first things I do. All right, everybody, so let's start taking some questions and hearing from the panelists.
Okay, great. Before we kick off, just a couple of things. First of all, for those that are taking the census, one of the fun things we're doing on Facebook is we're trying to get just how long it takes you to complete it. And we kind of have like a little contest for folks. So if you want to tweet us out or message us on Facebook, so far the record to beat is 2 minutes. I'm not quite sure how they accomplished that. It took 9 minutes myself, but just a little side note.
Okay.
Secondly, we've been doing this show now for quite some time, several weeks now. And so far, we've only had one consistent phone caller that has been with us every week, each and every week. And I'm getting the sense like we might have to start inviting her on the panel. Mr. Mayor, do you know who I'm speaking about here? Can you take a guess who our first caller is?
I don't know, because I might get it wrong. I would say the one and only Patty.
Of course, Patty, go ahead. You are on the air with the
Hi.
panel.
Hey, Patty.
Hi, Gary.
How you doing?
Oh, not good. I can't handle this. Well, I like to know, are we going to have to suffer like this for the next 2 years?
I don't think so. I hope not. But let's hear
Because
from
I'm very depressed here.
Yep.
My anxiety, no.
Well, hang in there, Patty. Let's hear from our health director. He has the latest as to where we're going to be in the next couple of weeks and months. So, Mr. Webb, and maybe we can hear from Mr.
I'm worried
Cronin.
about poor Margaret. She's 93 years old. She's scared stiff.
Okay, well, we'll check on Margaret tomorrow. Hold on one sec, though. Let me get Mr. Webb.
All right.
Mr. Webb?
I would say that, 2 years is probably not. A lot of people are hearing this 2-year period, and that's really going to be more of how long it takes a vaccine to be built and tested and distributed. So that's probably where people are hearing the 2-year mark. I don't think it's going to take that long. I think we're going to see, a really good close return to normal by the new year.
I hope so.
All right, let's hear
But not
from
before that.
Mr. Cronin on the phased approach. I mean, from what I understand, Captain Cronin, most of the phases will be rolled in over summer, right? Captain?
Yes. So of course, we're in phase 1 right now. Phase 2 is going to take place in, mid-June. And phase 3, of course, will be early July. So hopefully before the end of the year, we're going to be into phase 4, which is going to be the new normal. And I think, like Director Webb had said, I think that's going to come with the new year. So 2021, I think we're going to be back to the new normal.
All right, Patty, you hang in there. I'll call on Margaret tomorrow, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I can't deal with this.
I know, you're not alone, but,
I have
we
my
have to.
psychiatrist, my therapist.
Yep. We have your back, Patty.
All right.
All right, talk to you soon.
All right, thank you.
Bye, Patty.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks again, Patty. And I think the appropriate response was talk to you next week. She will definitely be joining us. She's always had great questions. We enjoy her calls as always. Our first question from our YouTube viewers, Amanda, who's also frequented the show. Great questions all around. Question is for the panel. Do you think schools will be open in September, full-time, partially, remote? Thoughts on that?
Mr. Webb?
Oh,
Mr. Webb.
I just didn't know who was going first. My initial guess on schools for September will be yes, but it will look a lot different than it does now. There may be, of course, everybody will be wearing masks, and there'll be, sanitizing of student spaces and teachers' areas that at a more constant rate than we're currently seeing. We're talking about with the school department now, how many meal sessions we can possibly have in a day to thin the crowd a little bit. So these are all discussions we're having now. We had our first meeting the other day. We've got another one every Wednesday. We're going to have a meeting, work out these little processes until we find out what our infection rate is at and whether we can open the schools or not. We should be in a pretty good space when that time comes.
So Amanda, what Mr. Webb's talking about, Superintendent O'Terry, at the behest of the school committee, has put together a committee that consists of city officials, teachers, students, and they're starting to meet to anticipate what the new school year might look like. So building on what Mr. Webb said, in some of the Metro Mayor's calls that I participated in, there was some talk about, lunches would be brought to the classrooms as opposed to the large gathering of students in a traditional lunch setting in a cafeteria. That's just some of what I heard. But let me ask Mr. Webb, because I've heard differing thoughts on the masks. So you're foreseeing the possibility of everyone wearing masks on a daily day in the schools? Or only when there's a possibility of an outbreak? How do you see that
If we're
happening?
not below the 5%, I think as long as the number is below 5% infection rate,
Yep,
you would not need to see masks. Of course, some students who have pre-existing conditions would always be wearing a mask.
right.
Until we were sure that the infection rate couldn't get over 5%.
Right, that
But,
makes sense.
I think initially, I think we're going to see masks for the short term until we can see how the population manages. I'd like to see them come off, obviously, for the
Right.
kids' sake.
Right. Now let me shift over to Captain Cronin. So if that is true, what would be your recommendation on the type of masks, right? Because we've heard different opinions about what truly is effective. So would you foresee, I suppose that will become a new item for the school department to be able to have those, in stock, on hand? Or do you foresee families having to
Mayor,
come
I
up with
think
that?
we have. So Mayor, of course, I think we have over 6,700 students in our system. So I don't think it's feasible to have, surgical masks available because they're disposable. They won't last long. I do think if that's what happens, we are going to have an alternative such as, reusable cloth masks.
Right.
That we can purchase, and that at least they will be able to be washed and used over and over. But to supply 6,700 masks a day is definitely not feasible at this point.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Okay.
let's go to the next question.
We do have a caller on hold, but before we get to that call, we did have one question that came in that we'd like to ask Alex Pratt. Alex, the question is, can you briefly describe the application process for filling out for rental assistance? Is it a lengthy process? Should they come prepared with certain documents to enter information? Just maybe talk about the application process itself.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a great question. So we've tried to make this as easy as possible so that everyone can be able to participate. So firstly, the application form is available online at cityofmalden.org/rent. And that application process, it has a number of questions. They're all pretty simple. I think the hardest question is probably going to be, what was your household income last year? That's the income of everyone in the household. We want you to make your best guess, look at any data you have and kind of estimate based on that. Based on your application that you submit through that portal, which should take maybe 10 minutes or so, as easy as taking your census, you should be able to be entered into a lottery if we determine that you are eligible. And then that lottery will narrow down the number of people based on the amount of funding that we can have. And we're hoping to serve between 300 and 400 families, maybe a little bit more depending on how the numbers work out. And once we determine who those families are, then we will go and say, hey, can we look at some of your, do you have your 2019 taxes or your 2018 taxes? Or if you don't, there might be pay stubs that we can look at. We're really, we try to make sure that there's nothing that's a barrier to preventing people who are eligible from receiving the funds that they need. So our team is really working around the clock to make sure that, if you don't have your 2019 or your 2018 taxes, that we find some other way of verifying your income, for example. So there's plenty of different ways that we can verify your eligibility. You don't need any of that information to apply. You just need to put your estimate, and that'll determine whether you are entered into the lottery. And then once you are selected in the lottery, then we will go through a verification process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Pratt. We do have a caller on the line. The next question is going to come from Pat. Pat, go ahead. You are on the air with the panel.
Go ahead, Pat.
Pat, do we have you?
Do you want to take a question?
I think we may have lost Pat. Well, we'll wait for Pat to. Yeah, sure thing. We will go on to one of our written questions that will come in, and then we'll check back in and see if Pat's available. The next question is whether or not the hospital admissions have come down, and what is capacity like? We heard so much about hospital capacity early on in the pandemic. I'm not sure if this is from Mr. Webb, Mr. Cronin, or both, but how is hospital capacity now, and can folks start to return, for normal things? Should they be worried about capacity now for coronavirus, for regular ailments, and so on?
Let's check with both, Mr. Cochran.
Why don't we go to Mr. Webb first? Go ahead.
Okay. Right now, the capacity is actually very good. The number of new admissions is lower, but there's plenty of capacity for those cases. The Department of Public Health wants us to remind people that it's time to reach out to your doctor for those put off kind of procedures that you were supposed to have, whether it be surgical or an exam or an MRI or all that. It's time to go back to the hospitals. They wouldn't be pushing for people to return if they didn't feel it was safe, and it is. And if you need to stay in the hospital after a procedure, they're going to put you in an area that hasn't been used for COVID patients in a long time. So they've worked out a very good rotation of patients. Not all patients are recovering completely at hospitals now. Some are being sent out to rehabilitation centers to recover so that the infection rate is low at the hospital. So please, if you have put off a procedure or a test, call your doctor and get it scheduled up as quick as you can.
Okay, Captain Cronin? I know you're in touch with Melrose
Yes,
Wakefield and Cambridge Health. What are you seeing and hearing?
So what I have seen and heard, Mayor, is that, in particularly the hospitals that surround us, the Winchester, the Whidden, the Melrose Wakefield, they're in very good shape right now. They're in a state of readiness if there was another surge, but their surge capacities are down in all hospitals. Their ICU units down in all hospitals. They have plenty of ventilators available, and hospitalization rate is down in all three of those hospitals. So it's a really good sign, especially in light of what the worst case scenario was, that we were going to be incapacitated at some point, but it never happened. It was getting close, but I believe that the hospitals, the medical community did a great job keeping this under control.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, our next question.
Okay. Yeah, so we do have Pat back on the line, so we're going to go to Pat as a caller. Pat, go ahead. You are on the air with the panel.
Okay. Just a
Pat, if you could go ahead and just turn down your TV or what you're watching the program on in the background, that would be excellent.
Mayor Christenson, this is Pat.
Hey, Pat. Good evening, Pat.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor. Just a question. The party that Councilor Secret held the other day at the town line.
Yep.
Is there going to be any repercussion? Anything done? Why she did something like what she did?
Yeah, not from our end. I mean, it was not something that was deliberate or in an attempt to circumvent the state order. I honestly believe she was trying to do something within the confines of what was issued by the state, and it just didn't work out. And she was the first to call me. You know, typically when these kinds of incidents happen, we have to call and find out what happened. But she called us, and she was just very apologetic, felt terrible about what happened. And, you know, based on my working relationship with her over the years, that was good enough for me. You know, plus, there's no one that has worked harder during this pandemic to raise the spirits of our city than Councilor Seeker. Whether that was through the, you know, the costume characters in the parades around our community, or celebrating Nurses Day, or leading the effort to recognizing all of our seniors graduating from high school. To me, again, you know, I was quickly ready to move on from it.
The only thing is she had more than 10 people there. That's the only thing.
Right, and I don't think that was her intent, Pat. I honestly believe, you know, from my vantage point, she was trying to do something for her family, again, within the regulations of the state order, and it just didn't work out that way. And,
That's
you know,
too bad.
she's been apologizing to me, I think to everyone ever since.
Right.
And so, again, that coupled with all that I've seen from her over the years, and especially during this pandemic, you know, it was good enough for us.
I agree with you 100%, Mayor. The only thing is, I don't understand why the town line even gave her permission to host a party.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either, but, you know, again, this really has been about Councilor Seeker, and as I explained, to me, I think she has apologized profusely, you know, especially to us, and that coupled with everything she's done has been good enough from our vantage point to move forward.
All right.
Thank you, Pat.
Good enough. All right. Thank you, Mayor. Good night.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Okay, thank you to Pat. And our next question comes from Facebook. Marie asks, what are the guidelines for houses of worship to be able to open?
All right, let's go to Mr. Webb.
Well, there are many, actually. They have to, there's two plans, one from the state and one from the Archdiocese, I know, for the Catholic churches. I have not heard anything from any other churches in town, but I am meeting with them tomorrow at 1:30. And the churches and synagogues are going to be online tomorrow at 1:30 with me to discuss the restrictions. And ultimately what it comes down to is there will be face coverings. There will be hand sanitizer available. People will have to social distance. Pews and seating will be blocked off or at least labeled for seating. Family groups, of course, can sit together. So every family group would have 6 feet between themselves. And I think as far as exiting the church at the end of Mass, you're going to see people leaving from the back of the building rather than the front, and dispersing as quickly as possible, probably, 10 pew rows at a time, or chair rows at a time. I had, if anybody's goes to the Immaculate, they have a great plan. I plan to share it tomorrow with the rest of the group. And it's actually very simple. I just wonder how many people will fit in each Mass, and I'm going to go Sunday to see just how it works out.
Okay. And we do have a call, I believe, set for tomorrow with
We
all
do.
the different houses of worship. So thank you for organizing that. I know Elena Savino from our office has been involved, along with Pastor Whetstone. So,
Yes.
All right. Next question. Unless Captain Cronin, do you want to add anything to that?
Mayor, I don't think I could add anything to that. I do know that the Immaculate, I believe, has already put measures in place, and I think they're going to have a Mass on Saturday at 4 o'clock, if I'm not.
And Captain Cronin, I
That's
think you
correct.
mentioned, along with Mr. Webb, you will be spot checking and going around to try to offer assistance and work with all the different houses of worship so they can get back to what they do best, right?
Absolutely. We're going to be assisting Director Webb wherever he needs us. We
Okay.
will be doing spot checks
Okay.
across the city.
All right. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, before we get to our next call, I'm just going to share my screen really quick and just show the folks at home that we have a guide that is available, and we've gotten this from mass.gov website. In particular, this was a PDF that's an overview for the standards that the state is asking for houses of worship in particular. And this same website offers up many different categories of business, and it dives right down into all the details. So I'm going to share this link as you see it here with Marie, and we're going to go ahead and move on from there. But that's all available linking through our website, and that's cityofmalden.org/coronavirus. And you can go ahead and like I said, we're showing all the different lines of business that are all linked there, and in particular construction and some of the ones that are happening right here in Malden. We're going to go ahead to our next caller. Mary, go ahead. You are on the line with the panel.
Hello.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having me. My question would be to Mr. Webb regarding the number of confirmed cases. I think I missed.
Oh, the number?
The number, yes.
Yep, it's 1,053 as of this morning.
Oh, 1,000. Okay, so there's been an increase.
Yep.
A very large increase, I believe. I'm looking at my numbers.
Yep. And Mary, that's probably due to all the testing that's now happening on Canal Street.
Oh, yes, that I understand, Mr. Webb. But now this is just my opinion.
Yep.
Okay? I think we need to okay, I'm only thinking now that we should get tough, a little more tougher, and have it mandatory that we wear face masks.
Yep.
Because when I do go out, I've been home since March, but when I do get in my car once in a while and I drive around, a lot of people do not have masks.
Yep.
The reason why in the beginning of this is that it wasn't like mandatory for masks is because there was a shortage of masks.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have people making them, and I have my mask, I got my N95, whatever. But I think we need to get tough. I think Malden, I don't want to say anything about a hot spot, but these cases are very concerning. And I think that we need to be tougher. I think Malden should mandate that everyone above that age should have a mask on, because we need to protect ourselves and we need to protect the other person.
No, understood. Good point.
When I drove through the square, there were people sitting on the benches at the beginning of Pleasant Street, and they had no mask on. They're just sitting around talking, and they were seniors.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't young kids.
Yeah. Well, first, Mary, let me see if we can get some feedback. But I think you may have mentioned we're not considered a hot spot here in Malden, despite the number of confirmed cases. It doesn't take away from what you're saying. But the other thing that has to be mentioned too is that the governor's most recent order isn't airtight either. There is the exception within the order that if you can properly social distance yourself, you do not have to wear a face covering or a face mask. And then the other exception is if you have a medical condition, you're not required to wear one either. So it's not mandatory in the sense that you and I would think it is mandatory. And so that's been a challenge for us and I think other communities as well. But let's bring in Mr. Webb and Captain Cronin to get their thoughts. Want to start with Captain Cronin, because I know you have particular feelings about this, Captain.
Sure thing, Mayor. So, of course, like the caller, I see people often. I walk the streets in Malden every day. Many times I see people without masks on, but when I do see them, I keep in mind that if they are socially distancing and they are, 6 feet from any other people, we can't make them wear a mask. And I know she said that she sees some of them sitting together on benches, but you also have to keep in consideration that many of these people may be relatives, they may be brothers, they could be brother and sister. So what's happening now that I've seen is some people are starting to tell other strangers to put masks on. And that's not the approach that I would suggest that anybody takes. As long as you have a mask on and you protect yourself, that's what you should do. As far as other people, most of them are aware of the law. And the first thing they do say when someone says put a mask on is they say, I'm socially distancing. And per the governor's order, I don't have to wear a mask. So that's just something to keep in mind. You know, if there's a larger group of people in there together and nobody's wearing masks, that becomes an issue for us. And of course, we would immediately act on that. But for the most part, people are self-regulating. And I think as far as that type of compliance, where there is a smaller congregation under 10, compliance has been very, very good in Malden.
So Captain Cronin, let me ask,
thank you.
based on what Mary was saying, so we talked about the exception if you're, sort of by yourself, you're okay, or if you have a medical condition, you don't have to wear one. Are you also suggesting that if I'm with a relative, that too is an exception, despite
Yes, typically out to the same family, they don't have, even if they're not socially distancing, they're not required to put masks on.
Okay. Mr. Webb, you want to add anything to what Captain Cronin said?
No, I thought it was great. The only thing I would back up on that is that, the big complaint I'm getting is people in elevators and closed spaces. Just remember, if you have your mask on, you're protected. Let other people go about their business, and it's not been met real well all the time with people giving other people advice about masking.
Right.
So protect yourself and let someone else worry about themselves. I can't stress that enough. As long as you have your mask on, you're safe.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Okay, thank you very much, and I give you a lot of credit. This is a heavy burden on the beautiful, beautiful city of Malden.
Thank
and
you,
just,
Mary.
it just bothers me.
Yeah, you're not alone.
It's just, it's Gary. My heart's out to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Again, I should close the show right now, but I think we still have more time. So let's go where, Ron? Online or phone call?
Yep. Yeah, we've got a couple of questions that have come in while the callers were on. And the first question comes from Paul, who's watching on YouTube. Paul asks, at Forestdale Cemetery, it is a tradition to plant U.S. flags at the grave of each veteran. Will this still happen this year?
Yes, but not to the degree probably that has occurred in the past. I think what Director Jim Cahill has come up with is we will be doing flags at the different sections. So the sections designated for our warriors will have flags placed on them. Now for headstones outside of those sections, what Director Cahill is going to do is have a setup when people are entering the cemetery on Memorial Day. They'll be able to obtain a flag from us to place at their loved one's site.
Very good.
Okay, great.
And I want to thank Jim Cahill for coming to us with that, initiative to do it.
Thank you, sir. And our next question was submitted to us via email. It's from Mike Bowdridge. Mike asks, he recognizes that early in the show, you had referenced about, perhaps relaxing some of the rules around the parks. And he references that in the governor's phase 2, that there were some sports teams were going to be allowed to resume practice and then eventually, some sort of game schedule. So if you could maybe comment on what Malden's plans may be in alignment with that.
That's a good question. I think right now all the focus has been on phase 1. So we're just beginning to start to look at phase 2. But believe me, I can't wait to see his son on the mound again. So we're going to make every effort to try to do what we can to start to bring back some of our youth programs. But as we did say at the outset, it has to be measured. I mean, I think we're now in May. This started March 12th. We don't want to go back to where we once were. So we'll consult with our health director, our emergency management director, our chief of staff and everyone else to see if we can get to where we all want to go. So just please continue to hang in there, and we'll update the community as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you. And just letting everyone know we are coming up against the end of the show, and we do have one more caller that we're going to go to, and then we'd like to give the opportunity for the panelists to close out with any closing comments they have. But for now, let's go ahead to Joan is our next caller. Go ahead, Joan. You are on the air with the panel.
Hi, Joan.
Good evening. I'm so glad you're there again tonight, Mayor, Chris, and Police Captain. I just been listening, especially to Mary, the last caller, and I could just hear her heart about how upset she is about all this. And people have been really hurting for the past few months over this COVID-19 virus.
Right.
I had a relative that died from it. I now have a relative that has the virus. And people are so down and so discouraged. And I just wanted to bring a thought to you personally, Mayor, that when it is safe, do you think that because of, in light of this virus and having to miss out on so many social activities and connections, that we could look forward to something in the city that we could enjoy, some type of celebration, to be so happy to get our freedom back and to feel good again about being out and safe around people again?
Capital Y-E-S.
Wonderful.
I don't want to jinx it, but it's a long way off. But when the time comes,
Okay.
we do want to do something, to
Great.
let our city know how much we've appreciated, all their help over the past several months. So we're with you on that one. And I don't know if I might have, I hope I didn't upset Mr. Webb, but I did say when the time is right. So
Wonderful.
we're with you on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Totally with you on that.
Phase
Yeah.
4.
Thank you very much. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
We do also want to point out too that if you do visit the mass.gov website, and it outlines the 4 phases, it's no mistake that phases 2 through 4 have not yet had dates
Right.
associated with them, and I think that's something that should be pointed out. And even though it's called out, I think the governor's approach is with trepidation to
Right.
make sure that these things things don't have to be backed out and then
Right.
pushed back in again. Okay, that wraps up our calls for the night. I'm going to check one last time for some questions, but while I do that, I think I'd like to leave it to you, Mr. Mayor, to cue the panel for their closing remarks.
If the panel could, just a quick closeout, and would you please provide your phone number and email if people had follow-up questions about tonight's program? So we'll start with Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to take this chance to remind everybody that great information is available on the mass.gov website, as well as the CDC website, which is cdc.gov. Very good, clear information on both of those sites, as well as the city website. There are feeds to both of those from the city website at cityofmalden.org. I want to thank Ron Cochran for the incredible work he's been doing behind the scenes. A lot of people don't know, but Ron is really keeping the data flow going. And, honestly, at the beginning, it seemed like a daunting task for one person, but he's really done a great job. I can't say enough about that. So thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
And remind people that stay on the masks, stay washing your hands. I know you hear it all the time, and I'm going to say it every chance I get, because I enjoy the summer just as much as anybody else, and I want us to get back to it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Webb. And if people have questions, what's the phone number and email?
I'm sorry. Phone number is 781-397-7049. And my email is cwebb, W-E-B-B, at cityofmalden.org.
Okay, great. Captain Cronin?
Yes, sir. So, Mayor, I'd just like to let everybody out there know that, your administration, as well as the many city departments, are working 24/7 to do everything in their power to lessen the impact of this crisis on our community. And likewise, I want to thank every one of our residents for their patience and cooperation during this unparalleled time in our history.
Okay, and how do they get a hold of you, Glenn, if they have questions?
Yep. My phone number, you can call anytime, 781-570-1035. That's 781-570-1035. And my email address is gcronin, GCRONIN @maldenpd.com. That's gcronin@maldenpd.com.
Okay, great. And finally, Mr. Pratt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My number is 781-324-5720, extension 0. If anyone has questions about the rental assistance program, we have a team at the Malden Redevelopment Authority set up to answer your questions. You can call that number. Again, it's extension 0, the number on your screen. And then you can also email us at rent@maldenredevelopment.com. It is so important that so many people in our community who are housing insecure have the opportunity to apply for these funds. We've translated our program materials so it's available not just in English, but also in Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Haitian Creole, Arabic, and Portuguese as well. That's all available online at cityofmalden.org/rent. And the deadline to apply is next Thursday, the 28th. And then we will be letting people know in the days after that if they've been selected in the lotteries and are able to receive funds.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And on behalf of Malden Access Television, Ron Cochran, our Communications Director, Maria Luis, our Chief of Staff, the City Council, and everyone in our city, we want to urge you to continue to be safe, take care, and we would normally end the show at this point, but I think leading into this weekend, we also want to take a moment to thank all those who have served, who have fought for our country, who have sacrificed, and who continue to do so today. We very much appreciate what you have done for us, and we will never forget it. See you next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Stay safe, everyone.